Goodness gracious. What the heck is going on, everybody? Welcome to the Luke Beasley Show. So glad to be with you, as always. Lots to go through today. Is there ever not? Sometimes, actually. We will be talking about how the Republican Party is maybe abandoning Trump a little bit. The actual voters? That's crazy. Uvalde, we'll be talking about the new footage that came out revealing just how incompetent, how terribly and ineffectively, there's just not a powerful enough word to describe how much the Uvalde police failed in acting about that, or, on that day. Then we'll be talking about how Alex Jones's wife has come out and said she wants to testify, or she has information, I should say, that she wants to share with the January 6th committee about Alex Jones. Of course, Alex Jones was featured in a video. What am I saying? I read the chat and I got confused. In a video during the January 6th committee, preparing for January 6th, he clearly wanted stuff to go down on that day. I saw Jared said, good new profile photo. Thank you. Yesterday, I went and got a fancy new photo taken of myself. I treated myself to a nice photo. Because I had a really old one. And I thought you guys deserved better than that, frankly. So I'm pulling it up right now. So this is the new podcast cover. Here, let me cut to it. Pretty cool. I'm wearing the same shirt, if you want to notice. Because I had it sitting out for that shoot, so then I wore it again right now. But yeah, very nice. Whoops. So yeah, lots to go through. Super excited. Important stuff. But interesting stuff as well. Before I jump into it, let's check in on the chat. Jeremy, good to have you here. We don't need to see buzz cut Luke anymore. I never had a buzz cut. I had a hair sticking up like this. So that's all that was. But yeah, you couldn't, yeah. I'm also going to change up. Oh shoot, I wanted to do that for this. Actually, let me see if I can do it right now. I want to change up the colors I use instead of like the orange and teal and stuff. I want like a different vibe. So let's see. What would be a cool new backdrop? All of these are here. I'll show you what I'm looking at. So the new Luke Beasley Show vibe is going to be like blue smoke, sort of, as you could kind of see in that last photo we looked at. Oh, this is kind of what I'm looking for. But I don't want it to be all black up here when I cut to a shot. Actually, that might be kind of cool. Here, let's see. Let's see if you like this. How do I do this? Image. Okay. Oh, I probably should download it. Let's see. Okay, we'll do this later. For today's show, we'll have the old fashioned, and then we'll do a new one tomorrow. All right, let's just go ahead and jump into today's stories. One of the big political questions, maybe the biggest in regard to 2024, is will the Republican nominee be Donald Trump? That will decide a lot of the reality of the political conversations, the political tides, and how the Democrats should run and structure a campaign. We chatted about in a previous segment about how Trump is thinking about announcing early. If he decides, which hasn't been completely confirmed that he's even decided to run, but if he does, he wants to announce very soon so that he can squash the idea of anyone else in the Republican Party challenging him. Another reason for this is he might hope that if he puts himself up as I'm officially running for president, the Republican electorate will just go ahead and accept him and support him, because it seems like as time goes by, as the January 6th committee reveals harmful information about him, as he doesn't really provide any new campaign platform that would be appealing, and all he wants to do is talk about 2020, and as other Republicans are starting to rise up, it seems like his support, even within the Republican Party, as we're about to look at here, is fading away. And so he might hope that to stop the bleeding of his support within the Republican Party, announcing his run for president officially might be able to do that. So reading, half of GOP voters want someone other than Trump for 2024, poll finds. About half of Republican voters said they would prefer someone other than former President Donald Trump as the presidential nominee in 2024, a new poll from the New York Times and Siena College has found. In a hypothetical contest against 5 other possible Republican nominees, just under half, 49%, of GOP voters said they'd support Trump's third presidential nomination. At 25%, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis otherwise saw the second most support. So Trump is still winning when you say, who do you want for president? And then you give a bunch of different options within the Republican Party. But half of Republicans don't want Trump. And so that brings you to the obvious conclusion that if the field is divided against Trump and there's no united around opposition within the Republican Party to Trump, then Trump's easily going to be the guy. But if one candidate could consolidate the rest of the Republican Party, that's over 50%. That's half of the entire GOP could back a candidate other than Trump and defeat him in the primary. Now, when it came down to it, when there were debates, when Trump was able to campaign against this person, all of those things, maybe these polls don't stay the same. But it is fascinating, nevertheless, because pretty much ever since Trump became the nominee for the Republican Party, he's been wildly popular in the Republican Party. All throughout his presidencies, ups and downs nationally, still within his Republican Party polling specifically, he was very popular, and there was never a question of if he were to run again, if he would be the guy. But now there is a massive question mark, as this poll reveals. Reading a little bit further, notably 64% of primary voters under 35 said they would vote against Trump in a presidential primary, the poll found. Such results suggest that Trump would not necessarily enter a primary with an insurmountable advantage over rivals like DeSantis. That's really fascinating. Younger conservative voters don't like Trump. Interesting. Continuing, what's more, Trump trailed President Biden 44% to 41% in a hypothetical rematch of the 2020 contest, despite Biden's plummeting approval ratings, the Times reports. So again, we do know it seems like Trump is really good at outperforming the polls. So just because right now, based on the polling, Biden would win if they did a matchup that was held today, that doesn't necessarily mean that would bear out in the real numbers. But it is good that even with Biden's brutal approval ratings, enough people don't feel favorable towards Trump that Biden is still somehow leading in this particular poll's matchup. I think the other good sign from that what it shows is that if you got a better Democratic candidate than Biden, as we've been discussing a lot lately, then maybe that's an even larger margin, because clearly there's still a heavy sentiment against Trump. If you give a better option than Biden as the alternative, maybe it looks not too bad for the Democrats if Trump runs. Continuing, but it doesn't look like Americans are hungry for another Biden-Trump ticket anyway. per a Politico Morning Consult survey released Tuesday, just 29% and 35% of Americans believe Biden or Trump, respectively, should run again. So 29% think Biden should run again. 35% believe Trump should run again. That's crazy. Because in a hypothetical situation where I say there is a president who has only been in power one term, so he's able to run for re-election, and then there's a former president who wants to run again, and obviously is able because he lost once. You would think there would be more energy behind both of those people, but no, pretty much the whole country is like, listen, you can ask me specifically who I'd vote for in a Biden-Trump matchup, but what I do know is I don't want either. I don't want to have to go and choose between those two. I want better, fresh candidates, which is one thing that Democrats and Republicans agree on. Now, the younger, the fresher candidate on the Republican side, I'm probably going to be just as afraid of. But at least there is a move in this country towards something different. And that's hopeful. And then the biggest hopeful element of this story is that the Republican Party is not lined up behind Trump like they used to be. And that could cause what we want to see is a Republican civil war, metaphorically, like a clash between Republicans politically over which direction the party should go or which individual they should fall in line behind. And if they can do a lot of damage to each other through that process and divide between Trumpsters and non-Trumpsters, that may help Democrats in elections against them. All right. How's everybody doing? Let's read the chat. Thank you, Nemo Nova. Octavian says, I've always liked the shirt blazer look. It's professional, but not too professional. You feel me? I totally feel you. Thank you. Yeah. I got sick of the suit. It felt too much, especially with like my room behind me, like a door and stuff. If there's a fancy studio behind me, then maybe a suit would make sense. But in this setting, it doesn't really. But then just t-shirts sometimes felt too casual. Like I wasn't putting on a serious show for y'all. So this is kind of the happy medium. You know? When is AOC eligible? I think she will be eligible for 2024 barely. I think she would be exactly 35 when she's sworn in, which is the cutoff. Thank you, Sam. Yeah, I like it too. All right, let's jump into, everyone liked the stream for sure. Of course. Oh, and by the way, for our Patreon members, I just recorded before I went live the bonus show. So that will be uploaded right after I get off today. Maybe even, after. So look forward to that. If you want to become a patron and get a bonus show once a week, plus you're helping me out a ton. One of the things I talked about on the bonus show today was how I love doing the show so much. Like, what the heck? It's so fun. I love spending a bunch of hours looking into politics and then preparing stories and then getting to tell you about them. And then even all of the random little menial tasks of editing and thumbnails and all those things. I love it. But obviously right now, because it's still small, it like can't be my only thing. So there's a lot of other things in my life going on. And I'm just looking forward to, based on the support of y'all and then growing the show, getting to eventually just do this because it's such a blast, And one of the things I said as well in the bonus show was that lots of things are in the works to really effectively grow the show, over the next few months. So that should be awesome. And a lot of that is thanks to the support that people like my patrons give. So again, patreon.com/Luke Beasley. And that helps me do this, helps me keep trying to build it in something bigger. And then also you get a bonus show. All right, let's jump into our next story. Ever since the shooting in Uvalde, Texas, where 19 students and 2 teachers, 21 people total, were killed, there's been a big question around what went wrong on the side of the police. Why was there this delayed response where more than an hour, different times kept coming out, but now it's been solidified to 80 minutes went by from when they got there to when they actually entered the specific area where the shooter was to stop him. Why? Why did they wait so long and allow more people to die needlessly? And to put insult, on injury, insult, the saying, to make it even worse, the Uvalde Police Department tried to cover it up. They tried to resist proper information coming out about this and try to prevent the public from getting that answer of why they were delayed so much and so incompetent in their response. But the footage has now been released, a particular security cam footage showing 80 minutes of the police just standing there doing absolutely nothing. So we're going to get to that footage in just a second here, but first, reading a little bit about it. A new wave of anger swept through Uvalde on Tuesday over surveillance footage of police officers in body armor milling in the hallway of Robb Elementary School while a gunman carried out a massacre inside a 4th grade classroom when 19 children and 2 teachers were killed. The video published Tuesday by the Austin American-Statesman is a disturbing 80-minute recording of what has been known for weeks now about one of the deadliest school shootings in U.S. history. That heavily armed police officers, some armed with rifles and bulletproof shields, massed in the hallway and waited for more than an hour before going inside and stopping the May 24 slayings. It's not something you can really get your mind around, to think about the fact that countless police officers were standing in the footage I'm about to show, doing nothing, hearing the sounds of massacre and knowing that children were getting murdered and not having the bravery in literal tactical gear. Even though, again, I know it's scary, of course, but that's the job you signed up for. Sorry. Okay, let me cue this up. So here's the footage. 80 minutes of this, but obviously we'll just watch some of it. So right here, for our podcast listeners, it looked like they were preparing to do something, but then they didn't. They were all geared up, countless police officers in bulletproof vests. And then one of the little moments that just really strikes you is a police officer standing there and reaches over to a hand sanitizer dispenser on the wall of the school and gets hand sanitizer. Like, why is that so disturbing? Well, it's such a chill, regular moment thing to do. No urgency if you're standing in a hallway and putting hand sanitizer on, like you're just chilling out. Unbelievable. So right now we're at the 57 minute mark from the time they got there, and that's what we're watching. So in the background, you can hear the sounds of shots being fired by this lunatic who is killing children. And all of these officers with very high-powered weapons and military-grade, body armor are just standing there. And I know it looks like they're involved in something, but maybe just at this moment they're starting to enter. But that door is where they should be trying to get into, where the kids are being slaughtered. $80 minutes went by before they actually entered and got the guy. Enough time for them to stand there, have conversations. A guy gets hand sanitizer. No urgency. I don't know. There's no like story to tell about okay. My instinct in covering something like this is to be able to give you some answer, like, here's the statement they made about why they took so long. And while it doesn't justify it, it does make sense. There's nothing. There's no story. There's no ending. There's no conclusion to why they did what they did. Why a group of police officers, heavily armed, did not go and try to save the children. Literally. And they haven't offered up any even bad explanation. They've offered up no explanation for why they took so long, other than they were afraid for their life possibly, which again, heart goes out to every single police officer out there who goes into scary situations. But yes, that's the job you signed up for, and kids are being killed, and you are there with an entire team of people with very high powered weapons, with body armor, who are supposed to intervene in situations just like this. And of course, it brings you to the thought process of one of the reasons they were probably so terrified is the individual had a weapon of war. And even though they all had very high power weapons themselves, they were afraid that he could do damage to this massive group of police officers. So maybe if deranged 21-year-old men weren't able to get their hands on weapons of war, police would be able to respond better. But of course, they should respond better regardless. That's not an answer for it, but it's one of the things we should also address. How about the police respond better, and also the individual carrying out these terrible acts shouldn't be able to get their hands on such dangerous weapons. So all around, quite disturbing, because you are hearing the sounds of kids being killed as police officers are just standing there. And this is why they have the authority they have. This is why they are given the access to weapons that are deadly, so that they can deal with situations like this. So often we see them wrongfully use that authority. And so whenever a time comes when you absolutely should use all of the military gear that you should have the high power weapon, they don't use it. In this situation, they didn't use it. And it's so upsetting, and you wish that they could give you some sort of answer for what the heck was going on, but they can't, because there is no answer. And more people are dead because of it. Heartbreaking, guys. All right, let's check out the chat. Oh, my goodness. So hot right now. Next, we're going to be talking about the Alex Jones stuff for anyone who just hopped on. Crazy. Yeah. One of the officers hiding behind the corner pulled out his phone, and at one point, if you zoom into the video, the homepage of his phone was the Punisher logo. Yeah, I saw that. God. So, I don't know what to say about that type of stuff. It's just like, ugh. Yeah, I do think there's a level of criminal negligence there. Their insane level of negligence led to people dying, and I think they need to be held accountable. At least the sheriff, because he was demanding people not go in. So Punisher's like gosh, what are they called? A mascot, sort of. A logo that cops use to represent themselves like tough guys. So it's like a little skull thing. Okay, let's do our next story. During yesterday's January 6th Select Committee public hearings, one of the big points they were making is that Trump's statements leading up to January 6th, prepping his audience to come to Washington and calling for a massive level of action that needed to be taken to take back our country and prevent the election from being stolen, how each time he would make those statements, social media would blow up among these radical groups and among radical influencers, starting to plan their attack on Washington and starting to propagandize their audience into believing this was some big 1776 style revolution to prevent our country from being stolen from us. That was what they kept putting out there, and it was perfectly being coincided, it coincided perfectly with Trump's statements. They were following his lead and then creating this big false perception that their followers needed to fight and attack to save the country. One of the individuals that they highlighted during the hearings and showed his social media activity and videos that he put out leading up to January 6th was Alex Jones. So we're going to get to how after this and during these hearings, Alex Jones' ex-wife was putting out on social media that she has information for the January 6th committee that she wants to share. But first, just to give you a feeling for why Alex Jones is even involved in all this, this was one of the moments they played during the January 6th hearings.
It's Saturday, December 19th. The year is 2020, and one of the most historic events in American history has just taken place. President Trump, in the early morning hours today, tweeted that he wants the American people to march on Washington, D.C. on January 6, 2021.
And now Donald Trump is called...
And then they did a montage. Let me get back to a little bit more of Alex Jones.
D.C., January 6th.
He is now calling on we, the people, to take action and to show our numbers.
We're going to only be saved 10. We know.
This is not Alex Jones, but it is notable. Watch how unhinged this guy was.
We're going to only be saved by millions of Americans moving to Washington, occupying the entire area,
it's also on InfoWars, so Alex Jones's network.
Necessary, storming right into the Capitol. We know the rules of engagement. If you have enough people, you can push down any kind of a fence or a wall.
This could be Trump's last stand when he has called on his supporters to something that makes supporters now or never.
Something, son. Wedding.
Okay. Lots of interesting stuff there. I'll keep encouraging y'all to keep up with the hearings yourself. But they highlighted Alex Jones, and presumably that was part of the reason why Alex Jones's ex-wife felt compelled to give information, we're not aware of what it is yet, about Alex Jones that would be relevant to this investigation and relevant to the January 6th committee. And so that is what we're talking about right now. Quote from Newsweek, conspiracy theorist Alex Jones's ex-wife says she has insider info that will be welcomed by the House Select Committee investigating the January 6th attack on the U.S. Capitol. This was something she shared on social media. Quote, I am Alex Jones's ex-wife, and I lost my kids for exposing InfoWars, which again is his network, even while he was under subsequent federal investigation. I have insider info that I believe is relevant to the January 6th committee hearings. Please share. Kelly Jones tweeted more than 40 times on Tuesday alongside previous tweets she had posted. Fascinating stuff. So he was highlighted as one of the people encouraging his followers to go to Washington and calling it this historic event. And hold up. And inciting his followers to possibly enact some sort of violence. This is another example of that Kelly Jones herself tweeted out.
If they want to fight, they better believe we're ready to fight. And we're going to win. We're not going to fight their little meth-head anti-Muscov. We're going to take on the Soroses and the Bezoses and the Gates. We're going to take it directly to those scumbag Nazi bastards that thought they'd kill this country, just like we did Hitler. And they'll be in their goddamn bunkers when we come for them. They will be hiding. They will pay. They will be destroyed because America is rising.
They will be destroyed. Wow.
17.
Oh, sorry.
1776 is the answer to 1984. 1776.
So what's the obsession with 77? Okay, founding of the country, all that type of stuff. They like to pretend that they are going to do some revolution similar to the American Revolution, to enact tons of violence. So it's their way of saying we are justified in a violent uprising, just like how we historically believe that Americans were justified in a violent uprising, and or the American colonies were justified, and it's time to do that again is the message he's trying to push. So he definitely was inciting violence. That was one of the things the January 6th committee was highlighting. But then now it looks like there's more information that his ex-wife might have. Now, this is a little bit risky because while of course I want to know what information she has, it does look like they have had massive feuds with one another and have clashed already. And so there is a lot more reasons than other witnesses we've seen before to why she would be more incentivized to lie about someone. But I would believe her because Alex Jones is a genuinely terrible person and has spread horrible theories, including that the Sandy Hook shooting was a false flag operation leading to the parents of kids who were killed through a mass shooting being harassed by Alex Jones followers, having to move multiple times because they were harassed so badly by Alex Jones's followers because of that theory. So he's a terrible guy. I'm sure there's a lot of information that his ex-wife has that would be damaging and that would possibly prove how bad of intentions he had. And then I'm curious to see if there's any sort of communication between him and Trump whenever they were closer, why she feels like this is relevant to the January 6th committee. All of that is really fascinating stuff. Who knows if it will bear any fruits, but definitely fascinating that she feels so passionate to share something about Alex Jones, who is a really big figure on that far right that we're talking a lot about lately in the context of the January 6th hearings, and may shed some light on just how dangerous of beliefs those people hold. And then, like I said, what possible association Alex Jones has with people closer to Trump and how that plays into January 6th. What's up? Chat. We got, let's see. We got one more fascinating story coming up here, so stick with us. Tim Pool got his 10 seconds of fame in the hearings. I don't think Tim Pool was necessarily calling to violence there. It seemed like he was just reporting on the moment, even though obviously Tim Pool, I think I'm not a fan of him, to say the least, but I don't know why they included him in the story, unless I'm misremembering his coverage of these events. It seemed like he tries to pretend that he's not really taking a side when it comes to something as radical as Trump calling people to Washington. I don't know. Yes, Alex Jones is the one with the gay frog. He thinks, or he at one point claimed the government was putting stuff in our water to make the frogs gay. And to make us gay, eventually, I guess. Alrighty, last story and then we'll chill out and just do some more fun stuff. The January 6th committee has been holding these big public hearings where they're walking through all of the information that they found over the last year of their investigation, as well as stuff that is just all coming to the surface right now because a lot of people are seeing the hearings and going, okay, you know what, now I'm motivated to share what I knew and what I witnessed. And so, because of this, a lot of us are wondering, does this rise? And it seems like it does rise to the level of a crime being committed by Trump. We can't possibly live in a country that claims to be democratic, but then allows their president to work to stay in power and reject the lawful election results and get away with it. So, the question is, do a lot of people agree? Now, that doesn't play into, or shouldn't play into, just public opinion if someone gets prosecuted for something, of course. But I'm just fascinated based on, or for the purpose of Donald Trump's future political ambitions, if a lot of the country is paying attention to these January 6 hearings, and if they also believe that Trump may have committed crimes and should be held responsible for it. Looks like a lot of people in the country really do believe that. Before we take a look at this poll, you do have to keep in mind, to believe someone committed a crime and should be criminally prosecuted, that's a lot more than just saying I don't approve of them or I think what they did was bad. That's saying I think there's enough evidence to criminally prosecute this politician for what they did. So this is a strong feeling that now, as we're about to look at, a majority of the country believes. Reading from Mediaite, in a poll taken amid the ongoing January 6 hearings, voters believe that former President Donald Trump committed a crime with his role in the attack by a whopping 21-point margin. Since the hearings began, there has been some speculation about whether the evidence laid out during the hearings will become the basis for a prosecution of Trump, which is only intensified as more and more damaging information comes out. In a new poll released this week, taken after the bombshell revelations of former White House aide Cassidy Hutchinson, but before Tuesday's riveting hearing, 56% of respondents to the poll said that they believe Trump's alleged attempt to overturn the results of the 2020 presidential election was a crime, versus only 35% who said they did not think it was a crime. That's huge. 56% of the country, a majority of our country, believes that Trump committed a crime, that a president committed a crime in trying to stay in power. So he attempted a coup. That's what a majority of the country believes, which is fascinating. I agree with you. I believe that Trump absolutely committed crimes in his attempt to stay in power. I think it's questionable of if he'll be able to be prosecuted for that, and that's what we're waiting to see now. And I'm terrified about if that does end up happening, what hell is going to break loose because of the MAGA base, who would be quite upset and has been brainwashed into thinking this is all just a big witch hunt. But as I'll continue to say, the level of threat to our democracy that Donald Trump poses is deeply profound. And I genuinely believe, regardless of your disagreements with any particular person on policy, everyone should be able to come together and say, listen, we can disagree about policy later. Right now, we need to recognize that we have an anti-democratic leader who wants to become wants to get in power again, and what damage could be done to our democracy because of it. And so it seems clear as day that you would work to prevent an anti-democratic leader like that from getting in power, regardless of if you identify yourself as liberal or conservative or whatever. But a lot of people just aren't being exposed to the proper factual media to even understand that's what Trump did. Or if they recognize all of the actions Trump took, they think it's because the election was genuinely stolen. And so it's a scary place to be in, where a majority of a country believes a former president committed a crime and trying to stay in power and doing or attempting a coup. Obviously, it was a political coup. It wasn't a military coup. It wasn't the movie scene that you picture when you think the word coup, but it was definitely a president trying to stay in power unlawfully. And a majority of the country believes that, but yet there's still a pretty good chance that person could get in power again. That person has enough support in the country that is passionate and motivated enough that he could become president again, even with a majority of the country believing he committed one of the most anti-presidential actions ever, in my opinion, in a democratic country, which is trying to undermine actively the democracy that you're leading. So it's good news on the front of Americans paying attention to this information and being swayed by it. It's bad news in that even with this sentiment being out there, Trump still has the level of support needed, possibly, even though it does seem to be waning, to get in power again, which is quite frightening. Whew. All right. Good to go. Good to go. Let's see. All right, suggestions on post-show stuff. We have some time. Yesterday I had to go early, so today I'll try to not go early. I'm terrified about what happens if they don't prosecute him. I genuinely believe, I do, starting today, or it started previously, but definitely today, that Trump is going to be politically damaged enough not to be able to run, or not to be able to successfully run for president. So I am annoyed that there's a good chance he won't be prosecuted because it seems like he committed crimes. But I do think the level of political damage that is being done by this will sink him. Maybe that's an over optimistic view of all this, but I don't know. What are you singing? Huh? Oh. Singing baby. It's a song. It's like, I think it's from TikTok, but I don't know the words at all. Singing out and leaving me now. My baby's up all out. No one in political office over the age of 65, please, sir. I think you can be above 65 for sure. But if you want younger people, we just need to vote younger people into office, you know? Oh, I wanted to watch this with you guys. Can I watch Bill Maher stuff on here, or am I going to get copyrighted? Let's see.
Okay. We're back on overtime. Okay, here are the questions. Jamie, in your new book, you write that Ronald Reagan's administration proved to be the gayest of any presidential administration.
I'm actually really concerned that this is going to get me copyrighted because it's from HBO. Oh. We'll be careful. We'll be overly cautious these days. Because you remember my stream just got cut off? That was awkward as heck. I like how optimistic Luke is. I am optimistic for sure, because I think we're gonna do it. I really do believe it's gonna be close, but I think we're going to hold on to our democracy, and then the younger progressive generations are going to trickle into the demographics. So like the older progressives plus the younger progressives will be able to kind of dominate in the country. I do believe that, and that gives me hope. But if we lose our democracy, then there's no hope for that. I'm also reading a really interesting book about like predictions for the next year, a few years, and he has a really interesting take on it that is giving me hope about our ability to survive. Don't do it, yeah. It's from HBO's official channel. Yeah, it is. All my babies, bum 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 bum. Oh gosh, do y'all want to watch more Jordan Peterson? I think we should do it.
Hi, everyone. I want to read a piece for you today that I wrote recently, over about a month, carefully assessing it with a number of experts on foreign policy. It's called Russia versus Ukraine, or Civil War in the West. We are now several months into the conflict with Russia.
Oh no, he's gonna try to blame this on the West, isn't he? Okay, first of all, his new I'm always PO'd vibe is so agitating. He's like, and a little sass to it all the time. Or a civil war in the West. Stop talking to me. I'm so upset. It's really funny.
I say we, because we are all pretending here in the West that the real war is between Russia and Ukraine, but nod, nod, wink, wink. If we clandestinely, in some sense, provide full support to Ukraine, maybe the Russians, foolish and backward as they are.
Oh, this is going to be good, guys. I love when people have the absolute, and by love I mean hate, but it's interesting to watch, have the absolute backwards understanding of the Russia-Ukraine war. Federalists and Hamilton believe that amendments to the Constitution were unnecessary. Do you think SCOTUS will try to say all the constitutional amendments are unconstitutional? Oh, I hope not. Thank you so much for the super chat, BW Rock. You're amazing, and I hope not, but you never know.
Won't notice, and we can simultaneously pretend that we aren't flirting with the prospect of a long, arduous, and inconceivably destructive war. I want to say at the outset,
Lord Vader said, do you think the media is bad? Like that statement is a little bit exaggerated and overblown, only because I don't think these people are evil and just doing their jobs. Great point to bring up. I do think that progressives sometimes get the analysis of the media wrong. I should probably do a video on this at some point, because it's kind of a longer conversation. It'll be a little bit disjointed in my presentation of it if I dive into all that right now. But I think, yes, the media gets things wrong terribly, and Fox News is a propaganda machine, and the mainstream media seems to frame these issues incorrectly a lot of times, but not for the reasons that I feel like people pretend, and not to the extent. And I think we can effectively carry forward the progressive mission even with the mainstream media operating just like it operates, which is really just to give the biggest microphone to the people in power. And so just we have to get in power for them to give us a good hearing, because it's not like they don't give progressives a voice. AOC had her big piece, what was it, the Being AOC or something on CNN, and we just watched a clip on my bonus show, patreon.com/Luke Beasley if you want to become a patron, where they were framing a question in such a stupid way that seemed very like moderate Democrat friendly instead of giving an honest reading to progressives. So like they mess up for sure, but it's not like this conspiracy against us. All the mainstream media is working together and has this plot to like keep progressives down. It's just the status quo is what they know, and they're doing fine, and so they don't understand why people would be so urgently trying to change so much, because they're millionaires, you know, all these hosts. And then they give the voice to the people in power, because those people are the ones that they're interested in talking to, or the senators, and because right now our government is more conservative than we want it to be, then more conservative voices are heard. Even like moderate Democrats are too conservative, you know. And so I think that's the main issue. And yeah, they take a lot of corporate ad dollars. Like they're going to be thinking about not making the corporations mad. I don't know, but like some people pretend, I've heard certain independent networks be like, oh, you can't trust any of the mainstream media, it's all corrupt, rah, rah. It's like, yeah, it's not, it's wrong. They're wrong oftentimes. But trust me, they have better journalistic practices than most independent media. I'm sorry. And they're still the ones we get all of our original reporting from. Like all these progressive shows, I love how I accidentally got into a long thing about this. All these progressive shows will talk about what's going on in the world and then say all the mainstream media is terrible and corrupt and you can't believe the New York Times, you can't believe the CNN. But like that's where they're getting their information from. Those are the ones who are on the ground in Ukraine. Those are the ones on the ground in all of these places getting us original reporting so that we know what's going on. And they're pretty good at it, like getting original reporting. And then sometimes the spin they put on it on TV and the stories they decide to tell can be a lot bit status quo friendly and stuff. And that's really irritating, and I get that. And they'll a lot of times give less favorable treatment to the Bernies and stuff like that compared to like a Biden in a primary. But I don't think we need to also be doing what Trump does, which is like calling everyone fake news. Everyone has their biases, and a lot of mainstream media has a little bit more of a moderate, like centrist bias. And we just have to deal with that and get more people in power so that those voices become more popular. And then it seems like when the popular, powerful voices are more progressive, like as I gave you the example with the CNN piece on AOC, they're totally willing to hear them out. And they do amazing journalism still. Like, guys, there's so many amazing journalists out there that we get stories from. That's how we get all this information. Anyways, thank you so much to Salim for becoming a patron. You're an amazing human, and I appreciate you so much. Hopefully that's a good answer to your question, Lord Vader.
That I think what Putin has done is unconscionable. God only knows what the impact will be.
Last thing on that, I'll also see some independent source, like, you know, channels and stuff, will cover like a CNN op-ed or something, like an opinion piece, and then be like, see, oh my God, they were so dishonest with their framing. CNN, so you can't trust them, they're so corrupt. It's like, but that was an op-ed. They say opinion on that. We need to be able to tell our audiences clearly that, listen, if you go to original, like Associated Press, the hard reporting that New York Times does, and all those things, you're going to get good information. That's good. Go there. That's wonderful. And then be careful if you're going to any opinion pieces. If you're watching any, like, pundits, if you're reading any op-eds, like, those are opinion pieces. You have to distinguish and not pretend that's all one thing.
As all four of the horsemen of the apocalypse are on the march again. I also think that the collusion of the leadership of the Russian Orthodox Church is even more
Leslie, good point. I don't think he pulls that low, but I get your point. The other thing is, I think progressive shows do a huge disservice to their followers in pretending that the whole country wants our politicians. The whole country is progressive, and they want, or like, you know, a majority, and they want everything we want. And the only reason that we're not getting them is because the politicians are corrupt. Yes, the politicians care too much about campaign contributions. Yes, a lot of people support progressive policies. Yes, but They don't vote based on them yet. Enough people don't. I'm sorry. Does that make sense? Like, if you ask someone, do you support Medicare for all? 60+% of the country says yes. But, or universal health care. But they don't go out and vote based on that issue. And so that's why we're not, one of the reasons why we don't have more progressive people in power. And we just have to convince more people to be progressive. And so it's like, don't pretend like the whole country is just uber progressive already. It's like, we got to move people on it, and then we'll get enough people to put the leaders that we want into power. Yeah, Pacman's good at making that clear. Like, he doesn't overstate how progressive the country is. Even though, again, they support progressive stuff, and that's amazing. And that's what we can use to convince them to vote for progressive candidates. But a lot of people who say they support universal health care would say, I think Bernie's too radical. Is some of that dishonest framing for the mainstream media that kind of brainwashes people? Of course. But we do have to convince people that progressive policies and issues aren't too radical, even though people want you to believe that.
Unforgivable. Be that as it may, I also believe that the attempt to deeply understand the motive forces for this war, as it is very difficult to set things right, let alone avoid a similar future catastrophe, or even to stop this conflict from spreading in the absence of such understanding. I have spoken publicly on my YouTube channel and podcast with American foreign policy expert Frederick Kagan, who was recommended to me by some of my conservative associates in the U.S., people with extensive political experience and simultaneously knowledge about foreign policy. Kagan is rather hawkish in his outlook and reputation, and was criticized for this, as I was for hosting him, in the social media comments section accompanying my YouTube channel. Our joint episodes, by the way, have been viewed or listened to by at least 3 million people. I'm saying this just to provide evidence that these discussions have had some impact in the...
Hey, let's see. Patrick's Time said most Americans don't want government-run healthcare. Well, it's not technically run healthcare, but it is health insurance. So let's see. Support for Medicare for all is at 69% in 2020, which is government, run health insurance.
Broad public sphere.
But again, they don't vote based off that. In theory, you ask someone, hey, do you support universal health care? And they say, yeah, sure. But then they don't go and vote for candidates who support universal health care because they think the aesthetic of a Biden is safer or whatever,
Dr. Kagan essentially put forward the thesis that Vladimir Putin is a prototypical authoritarian, and that Russia's foray into Ukraine...
They need to get better microphone for him. They need to master his audio or something afterwards, because it's so peaky and loud and quiet and loud. You gotta bring up those valleys and smush the mountains.
Might be properly viewed as an expression of the imperial expansionism that characterized the Soviet Union. So this is Cold War round 2. Accompanying this view is the interpretation of Putin as a thug in the Hitlerian mold, carrying a chip on his shoulder, interested primarily in self-aggrandizement and capitalizing on Russian patriotism and an associated populist appeal to fortify his pretensions to empire and desire for an unlimited extension of personal power. This perspective, which appears to characterize what might be called the Western patriotic response to the Russian incursion, has its very real justifications. It appears part of uniting in response to an enemy, part of justifying what is necessarily a binary decision process. Are we at war or not? If yes, then the question arises, is the enemy bad by definition. Otherwise, the war is unpardonable. And if we believe that to be the case, we will enter the fray demoralized.
I was thinking about the healthcare conversation just now. So now I'm lost. What is he saying? His point sounds stupid. I can't tell what he's saying.
And compromise our chances of victory. But one of the primary justifications for a war, perhaps, is that we have something to gain. I see that we have little to gain in the current situation.
Wait. Oh, he's talking about the United States being at war?
And certainly, much we could lose. Russia is a nuclear power. And we run the very real risk of backing them into a corner. And that, bad as it is only one of many of the options.
Wait. Biden has kept us out of direct military conflict. We're supporting a country that's getting invaded through resources, military equipment, and sanctions on the person invading them, on the country invading them. So what? I'm confused. Like, what's the way that we're backing Russia into a corner? Are you saying because they have nuclear weapons, we're supposed to just not support at all a country that's being, illegally and offensively invaded by a larger country?
Options for disaster that currently face us. Many people watching my exchange with Dr. Kagan suggested that I broaden my understanding by reviewing the work of Dr. John Mearsheimer of the University of Chicago, who offers an alternative interpretation, one that more specifically highlights the faults of the West. Dr. Mearsheimer's remarkably prescient 2015
It's funny. People acting like the West has acted horribly in this situation. The West has made some horrible mistakes. And by that, obviously, like all the European countries and all of our allies in Europe and then Canada and the United States. Like, we've made a lot of mistakes in the history of us kind of identifying with one another. But the way we've dealt with Russia in this Ukrainian conflict, in them invading Ukraine, has been pretty darn good as far as foreign affairs goes. Like, we've done a really good job of not going too far and causing a nuclear war between both of us, not getting military involved directly, but doing a lot to support Ukraine. And it's like, okay, just say you're pro a world where more powerful countries can just invade other countries for their land resources, and that's why we oppose the illegal invasions of countries the United States did. But like, just admit it. You're on board with Ukraine being demolished, people being slaughtered without any support from more powerful countries. For what?
University of Chicago lecture, Why is Ukraine the West's Fault? Available on YouTube and now watched by 30 million people, an unheard of number for an academic lecture. I was concerned that Mearsheimer might be a Russian apologist in some relatively simple manner, although that does not seem to be the case. In a singularly lucid one-hour presentation, Mearsheimer explained that NATO and European Union expansionism into Ukraine, the invitation proffered to Ukraine to join the EU, the formal statement of the desirability of NATO's extension into Ukraine, has already and will continue to pose an intolerable threat to the Russians, who view Ukraine both as an integral part of the broader Russian sphere of interest and as a necessary buffer.
I hate this framing. I hate the Patrick's, shut up. I promise I know more than you. Go watch my video on the original conflict before it happened. Okay, my goodness. What was I saying? Oh, I love the framing of, like, because Russia sees a country as within its
between the Europe
sphere of influence, we should let them just do whatever they want to that country. Why do we care how they see that country? It's its own country with its own. It's a sovereign country that can make its own decisions. You don't get to invade the country based on the decisions it makes, unless it's like invading you, obviously.
that has invaded Russia to terrible effect in 1812 and 1941, and that is no more trustworthy to Russian eyes now than previously. Mearsheimer compared the former element of that view to the U.S. Monroe Doctrine, which makes the Western Hemisphere sacrosanct with regards to, say, the movement of Soviet missiles to Cuba, and the latter to the stark realities of the difference in the importance of Ukraine to Russia, crucial, and to the West, irrelevant except for the transmission of Russian natural gas and any and all current exploitation for the purposes of shallow moral posturing. Mearsheimer states starkly, and this explains a fair bit of Putin's potential motivation, that Russia would rather see Ukraine destroyed, razed to the ground, than comfortably ensconced in the Western sphere of influence. And Mearsheimer said that not last month or last week in response to the Ukraine incursion, but 7 years ago in 2015. Mearsheimer also claims that the Ukraine president, Yanukovych, deposed in 2014 in the aftermath of widespread pro-EU protests, was the clear favorite and choice of the Russian-speaking Ukrainians, who overwhelmingly occupy the southeastern section of the country. While Zelensky...
Jeremy said he's reading pretty well from his cue cards. True. What he's saying is dumb, but being able to effectively read off of like a teleprompter like this with the level of fluidity and emotion and stuff he is actually impressive.
The current president and supporter of all things Western was and is supported by the Ukrainian speakers who live in the Northeast. Add to that as well the fact that the Ukrainian-speaking supported government has placed increasingly draconian restrictions on the language rights of the Russian speakers in the Northwest.
It's funny. One of the things that people do in trying to justify Russia's invasion of Ukraine is like pointing out anything that was going wrong within Ukraine, that was being done that was bad within Ukraine before. And it's like, yes. And how does that justify another country invading them? Like, the United States has done a lot of stuff that's horrible within their borders. Does that mean that Canada should invade the United States? Like, what? Really, really confusing.
In fact, all Westerners balancing the complexities of multiple languages in their own countries should be particularly sensitive to and understanding of. All this to say that Putin and the Russians have their reasons for concern over the situation in Ukraine. We could reasonably add to these two theories of the conflict some observations about the energy front. Russia is a petro giant, providing almost 15% of the world's supply of oil and natural gas, and is extremely dependent on that single resource, whose revenues make up almost 50% of the state budget and perhaps 30% of total GDP. Almost half of the Russian fossil fuels exported make their way to Europe, which has allowed itself to become dangerously dependent on such outside sources for one of its primary necessities, not least because of its faux moral stand.
Lord Vader, yeah, yesterday we watched those clips. The Secular Talk interview with Jordan Peterson. I don't really have like a thing for, someone said, why are you obsessed with Jordan Peterson? I think this is the first time I've covered him. We're just happening to do two things in a row. But, I mean, he is massive. Like, he put this video out today, I think, or yesterday. It has 1 million views already. Like, he's very, very influential, so it's important to cover people who are spreading misinformation, who are influential,
On issues of the environment. It's not so easy for the Russians to get their oil and gas to market, partly because the behemoth country is remarkably landlocked in a practical sense. They've had to build extensive pipelines to do so.
One of the things I think that people do also in the conversation around Russia's invasion of Ukraine when trying to justify Russia doing it is like, he's not dived into the history yet, but one of the things I've heard people do is I'll do this really long explanation for the history of Ukraine and then like go into so many details about Ukraine, Russia, history of the, and it's all interesting, and I'm not believing that they're really lying about any of the details, and again going through any of the terrible things that were going on in Ukraine, but then they never get to how that relates to why Russia should be allowed to invade them, you know? It's so fascinating. It's like I'm going to try to make myself sound really smart by giving you a bunch of details to prove that I know a lot without answering the question that I'm here to answer, which is, why am I playing defense for a country illegally invading another country and slaughtering a bunch of people?
The two of those that serve the European market, upon which the economy of Russia is fundamentally dependent, pass through what are now other countries. This is not convenient, to say the least, for the Russians, has caused no shortage of conflict between them and Ukraine specifically, and has certainly encouraged constant Russian interference in Belarus, which is in some real sense a puppet state of its larger partner. When the Soviet Empire collapsed, the huge oil fields around the Caspian Sea suddenly found themselves in the hands of the new countries of Kazakhstan, Azerbaijan, Uzbekistan, and Turkmenistan. After 1989, these resources attracted major attention from Western energy companies, and untrammeled production from the new countries posed a...
Yeah, Patrick, isn't it funny that isn't it so funny to laugh at a bunch of thousands of people dying for no reason? And then you're defending that country? Like, wow, that's awesome. I can't imagine what it must feel like to do intellectual backflips to try to defend a country who is needlessly causing thousands of people to die. Again, similar to how I think it's disgusting to defend the United States' actions in countries in the response to 9/11. Like, we also caused tons of carnage. And that's why I have the stances I do, because I would never defend needless slaughtering of people.
A threat to Russian domination of the European energy market. This has produced unending tension in the region, not least around Azerbaijan, which has run its own pipelines to thirsty Western markets through Georgia, invaded non-coincidentally by Russia in 2008. Turkey and Albania, thus partially circumventing Russian control over petro export. The fact of this relative emerging independence has also allowed Azerbaijan to move further away from the Moscow-centered sphere of influence, and sets a worrying example in the Russian view to other developing post-Soviet countries in the area. Add to that the fact that 80% of Russia's oil and gas exports once had to pass through Ukraine, although this problem has been remediated somewhat, and the stage was and is set for trouble. This became particularly evident in 2005 with the Orange Revolution and the rise of Viktor Yushchenko's overtly pro-Western Ukrainian regime. Shortly thereafter, the Russians demanded that Ukraine turn over ownership of the pipeline system traversing that country to them. This request was refused. In response, and during the winter, the Russians briefly turned off the taps supplying Ukraine with the petro resources upon which that country was also acutely dependent. It is also the case that Ukraine has immense and relatively recently discovered, circa 2010, petro resources of its own, particularly around the Caspian Sea.
I feel like this is just poor delivery because it's not clear the points. Like, one of the things I always like to do when I'm about to go into a long explanation about something is be like, all right, by the end of this, I want you to have understood these points and then like lay them out. All right, point one, right? Instead of just going to a super long monologue where it's like, cool, lots of details, what is the crux of your point here?
Sea and in the Northeast. Enough natural gas, for example, so that it could have become a major supplier of that resource to Europe and thereby pose a threat to European reliance on Russian resources. Ukraine also possesses, although perhaps not after the current war, immense storage capacity for petro resources, another asset that could limit the influence that Russia can exert over its European customers by providing a buffer against any suddenly imposed limitation of supply. In the last decade, Ukraine has been actively pursuing agreements with ExxonMobil, Shell, and Chevron to develop and export their new resources. The 2014 pro-Western revolution in Ukraine, toppling what was then the pro-Russian government there, did little to set Russian minds at ease.
That's the other thing people bring up a lot, is like, it's some horrible conspiracy that the Ukrainian government became more pro-Russian, or went from being more pro-Russian to being more pro-Western. And it's like, in the current world we live in, which side would you want to be in favor of? Which side would you want to be in the good graces of? Russia, an increasingly isolated and increasingly less powerful, decreasing in power country? Or the West, that has a lot more hope for a prosperous future? So it makes sense that a country like Ukraine, that's its own country, they can make its own decisions, would shift a lot and become more pro-Western.
The consequent invasion of Crimea placed a substantial proportion of the new Ukraine petro reserves in Russian hands. The later invasion of the Donbass region in the aforementioned Northeast, putatively to support pro-Russian separatists there, was perhaps motivated by analogous reasons.
Again, it sounds like he's making our points. Yeah, good job. You're walking through all the times that Russia invaded countries wrongfully, showing that clearly this isn't something that just suddenly the West like triggered, because Russia's been doing it. It's a pattern we've seen.
So that's three hypothetical reasons for Russia and Ukraine. First, Putin, the imperialist Soviet-era Hitlerian thug. Second, Russia, threatened by careless and provocative Western expansionism into a country we really don't care about, except when our unearned moral virtue is challenged, but which is key to Russian identity and security. Third, Russian concern about maintaining its primarily petro-funded economy, particularly in relation
I see.
to
He's like laying out what the belief by other people is about why they're invading, and then he's going to lay out what the real reason is. Stop yawning, turn them off. Guys, I'm going to say this again. I do a news show, part 1 of the live streams, where I have prepared stories that I've researched and I present. Then part 2, I react to stuff and I do more long form, slow, chill content. Because a lot of people have expressed to my audience, they're not clip watchers. Some people are, so I do that. And then some people like something they could turn on for multiple hours while they game or while they work or whatever. So each day I have to figure out how to fill multiple hours after my news portion. Whenever I get people in the chat who says, stop watching this, it's not helpful, because you could, if you want to include something else that would be more entertaining to watch, then I'm all ears. But there's only so much interesting political long form content that I can react to. I'm happy to hear your suggestions, but if I turn it off, then it's just this. What? Am I going to talk for multiple hours about nothing? I know I'm being sassy, but it's how I feel.
European market.
It's like the simultaneous desire from audience members to like get more content and also never being satisfied with the content that they get. It's fascinating.
But even
and it's like always something different. Sometimes I'm reacting to right wingers. Sometimes I'm having super long conversations with people who call in. Sometimes I'm watching like old debates from 2016 and like presidential debates. And then sometimes I'm watching like streamer debates. I feel like I'm checking boxes, but there's never enough checked for you guys.
3 reasons are not enough to account for the fact of this war and its emergence here and now. There's a 4th.
How about the video of the Uvalde police? I covered that in the first portion of the show already, in like the news portion.
Precisely germane to why I entitled this essay, Civil War in the West. In the West, no, not in the Russian Empire. A few weeks ago, one of my viewers or readers or listeners sent me a copy of the great Russian novelist Dostoevsky's A Writer's Diary. Dostoevsky regarded A Writer's Diary, twice the length in its entirety of his longer works of fiction, as his preeminent achievement. It's a hybrid work, which he began publishing as a series of columns in a conservative weekly journal called The Citizen. It is the work of the accomplished journalist the great Russian author was, in daring combination with the works of...
I am bored by this though, so I'm in agreement with you on that. Someone said do interviews. I always have open phone lines if y'all want to, not actual phone lines, but open like Discord if y'all want to come and talk. But if you think I'm going to fill multiple hours like with pre-prepared people that are relevant in the world that I would want to interview, I would need a much larger operation over here to make that happen. Thank you, Grease Monkey. I'm so darn tired today too. What the heck? It's weird. Okay, I'm in the situation where if I'm rested, I won't go to sleep at night. So it'll be like 3 a.m. and I'm just wide awake, like so energetic if I slept good the night before. But then I'll not sleep well, and then the day will happen. I'll be tired all day, and I'm like, oh, I just need to sleep tonight. And then I'll sleep that night, and then the next night. So it's like I gotta hit that perfect balance of being sort of tired so I can fall asleep, but then I have to be tired throughout the day if I want to sleep good. Blah, blah, blah. Sucks. Yeah, the Hunter Biden stuff does not interest me at all. Yeah, Patrick's, if you want to teach me, I would love to learn from you. I am interested in any possible corruption that happened while Biden was vice president. I'm not interested in watching someone's, like, making fun of someone's addiction or watching like sexual content of some random child of a famous politician of the president. Never. If there were clips out there of like Don Jr. doing drugs, I wouldn't want to cover it, except for if he were a part of the administration, you know? If it's relevant to a governing person, then obviously, but like making fun of some guy who clearly has terrible addiction issues is not something I'm interested in at all. Or you bunch of perverts who are loving the leaked information or leaked videos of like Hunter Biden in sexual interactions is like so weird and random. Why do I care? Why would I care? Trump dancing to YMCA. If Don Jr. was involved in the administration to an extent. Like if Ivanka, she was in the administration, so that's relevant because that affects the policies and like the competency of her governing. But I don't think y'all pick up on, like, I make very specific efforts on the show to act in a certain type of way that is consistent. So like I never, to my best ability, maybe I failed at some point, but I almost never make fun of like physical stuff. So like if someone looks weird, there's a lot of people we cover on the show who like have a funny look. I'm never gonna make fun of that. Lots of people do. Charlie Kirk's an example of that. A lot of people make fun of him for like his facial proportions, which like that's not something I'm interested in. And same thing with this type of content. If there was just information about Don Jr.'s party life, no, I wouldn't cover it. People have been claiming he is, always high on coke forever. The whole time he's been famous, people have been like, oh, Don Jr. on coke. Have you ever heard me say that? Never. So yes, I'm consistent on these things. I care about what is relevant to their ability to be a leader and what is relevant to their effect on the country. If you're just a child of a famous politician and you have a wild, tough life, that's not interesting to me. Now, again, any possible corruption, that is interesting to me. But Patrick, can you please, are you the same person who wouldn't come on last time? I really want you to come on and like explain what you think I'm missing about the Russia-Ukraine situation. I feel like that'd be an interesting conversation for people. Come on. If you have such strong feelings about me not knowing everything about this, then just come on and freaking explain it.
Hello, everyone. Before diving into this topic, I've got to clarify something. I am reading some of the pieces that I'm producing, and that means that these are things that I wrote. The reason I'm doing that rather than speaking extemporaneously is because...
Yeah, it would be an interesting conversation. Patrick, come on. Or stop chatting, because clearly you don't actually believe what you believe if you're not willing to explain it to me on stream.
Now and then, if I'm pushing myself to the limits of my conceptual ability, then I have to choose my words with the undue care that writing allows. And I suppose that has the disadvantage that's associated with reading something rather than speaking off the cuff, but the advantage of precision and care. So today I'm going to read a piece that I entitled, Why Twitter is Insane.
I love the obsession with Twitter. No, I'm not obsessed with Peterson. We're doing a Peterson day today. We're just watching his stuff today. That's what we're doing. He's spreading a lot of misinformation, and I think it's relevant to cover. Whoa. I didn't mean to click go. No, just the chat doesn't let you send links, that's why. But you can email any links to me at lukebeasleyofficial@gmail.com. Which, by the way, someone else sent me links. I promise I'll always get to it. It just might take a long time because life is insane lately. No, email it to me. Holy smokes. Patrick's, why are you ignoring my request for you to come on?
It is often said that social media is driving us out of our minds, individually and
It's driving you out of your mind, bro.
collectively. Is this true? And if so, how and why? The eminent social psychologist Jonathan Haidt recently wrote a hard-hitting article showing that use of certain forms of social media, particularly by girls just entering
Oh my gosh. Grease Monkey said Jordan Peterson, the evil version of Mr. Rogers. Totally. That's totally the vibe.
adolescence was directly and causally associated with higher rates of depression and depression-related symptoms since the early to mid-2010s. I had been thinking along broadly similar lines, particularly with regard to Twitter and how its incentives are structured compared to those that characterize healthy human interactions. The extent of its harmful pathology has recently been brought home to me as a consequence of those deliberations. A thought experiment. Imagine, for example...
Oh, I see. Okay. The reason why these videos are so boring is he's reading, like, op-eds he wrote or pieces that he put out. But see, the thing is, the malignant narcissism spurred on by social media platforms that he's identifying, there is a, like... Oh, this would be interesting. Gay pitfalls. Or gay parenting pitfalls. There's truth like how harmful the social media is. But for him it's just because people are like too woke on it or something. This had a lot of crazy moments, but I don't have enough time to cover this. This might be for another day. Because it was so awkward. Like, Dave Rubin just completely... I don't know the word. Gives up any dignity he had left. Alright, well, Patrick, if you don't want to talk to me, if you're not confident enough to argue / explain your stance, then I guess we'll just give up on that.
10 years ago that I'd be...
Oh, that's crazy. Ooh. Yeah, we watched this recently. Ba 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 ba. Bum 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 bum. Oh no, everybody, all right, y'all. I'm gonna go. Much love to you all, sort of, to some of you. Patrick, let me know if you ever want to talk with me. If you ever get up the courage, I would have a blast with it. And I'll see you guys very soon. See you tomorrow, 5 p.m. Eastern.